it is sort of as good as the prompt that you derive. And if you can dream up a use case that you could apply it to, like curiosity is really the key to being able to apply AI to your job. And
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the Revamp Podcast. My name is Mark Lerner, Director of Growth Marketing here at DealHub, and I am your host, and joined today by Demar. We had the opportunity to meet recently at an event in New York City, and we got into some really interesting discussions and kind of wanted to bring those to the fore here to our audience. But before we jump into some of that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks at home, maybe tell them a little bit about what you're doing at AccessiBe and kind of how you got to where you're at in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me, Mark. Demare Amacker, Director of Revenue Operations at AccessiBe, as you just said. I've been with the company for about 5 months now, so really still kind of getting my feet wet with all of the things we have going on from a go-to-market standpoint here. But in my role, I oversee our RevOps team, which includes a RevOps analyst, a Salesforce admin, and a Salesforce developer. So really grew up as a sales ops function that we're transitioning more into a RevOps function here at AccessiBe. So exciting times. We just brought on a new CRO. So definitely an exciting time to be part of AccessiBe, which is a web accessibility platform that really aims at making the web more accessible. So we're knee deep in quite a few projects right now, but looking forward to chatting more.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so when we met the other day, there were a few topics that kind of um, we got into, but one of them that I think we really got deep into was, we were sitting with a group of people, and I was asking everyone, if in RevOps they've yet to see, actual use cases where AI has been valuable beyond kind of the parlor tricks that people get interested in, but like really be able to use it at scale. Um, and you and I kind of we're talking about some of the different things we have been doing. Um, and so maybe we can kind of dive back into that. I mean, um, from your perspective, as somebody in a RevOps role, especially it sounds like, there's a transition happening where you're moving, RevOps is kind of taking on a more prominent function. Um, does AI play a role today in kind of the work you do? And kind of from your vantage point, like where do you see the value of it for someone in a RevOps role?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is obviously, it's been the buzzword for, at least Gen AI specifically. It's been really the buzzword, things like ChatGPT really taking hold over the last year and a half. So, as an early adopter for Gen AI in my role, I've been trying to find, the right sort of application across, different projects that I've worked on. Is it better used as a time saving tool? Is it better used as a way that you can sort of start to get the wheels turning on things like sales enablement content? Is it a good way to sort of summarize things like calls and whatever? Obviously every platform now, from a tool perspective, has some lean into the AI world, whether it's Gong or Salesforce or whatever tool you kind of have in your stack that is leveraging AI in their native kind of capacity. But I like to use the Chat GPTs of the world, the Claudes of the world, to really help me force multiply myself, and my staff obviously uses it in that capacity as well. So things as simple as taking a Salesforce formula, row level formula that is applied to a report and making it more efficient, or maybe the syntax was incorrect when we originally designed it, maybe just fixing it in that regard. It's really great with error handling. So if you just feed it something that you're seeing, whether as a Salesforce error or from a syntax error in Excel, can usually help you modify your query so that it becomes something that's, obviously more usable, and obviously giving you the output that you're looking for. So I use it to short circuit, the sort of, you know code dictionary that, I don't have to have readily available in my brain as far as knowing the exact syntax sometimes.
Yeah. So it's kind of you use the like sidekick aspect of it often, it sounds like. That's just
Yeah,
kind of
and
like
I
a
mean,
chat interface.
yeah, when sales, obviously, or whenever, sales ops, RevOps is, oftentimes, operating very leanly, you sometimes have to, learn on the go, so that it does help to bridge some of the gap of, how would you do this, or if you've already done the work to, do a lot of the documentation, make this, more consumable for my end user, make it something that, turn it into a fun training or a fun exercise. So I know our sales enablement team has used it to create, training kind of dialogues and, coaching, out of transcripts and things like that out of Gong, to give sort of that, that AI, um, assistance, for our very busy sales leaders.
Yeah. It's interesting because, there's I think there's two two types of, well, there's probably more than two, but two that go through my mind of the way people use AI. One is, I think, the way you're talking about, which is like, your assistant that helps make you more productive, democratizes certain information, right? So if you're not a dev person, you can get code questions answered and do some of that apex stuff that maybe you wouldn't have been able to, or somebody on the team wouldn't have been able to.
Right.
um, and but then there's also using it within a kind of automated workflow to do something for you, right? So that you don't have to hard code, um, if and or, but kind of have an AI kind of in the loop there, kind of making those decisions.
Yeah.
That's the use case I find most exciting, but it's also the one that's most complicated because it's very difficult to ensure that it's doing the right thing.
Yeah, and it obviously takes a ton of testing and validating, and, obviously re kind of prompt engineering. But one example that I have of that is, so the AccessiBe business model is very sort of 50-50 partner and sort of direct. So when our inbound SDR teams have to, what we call vet a new inbound lead, it can take, oftentimes, somewhere, upwards of, a minute to 5 minutes to determine, is this account a good partner lead for us, or is this account more of a website owner direct lead? And what we've actually done is taken AI and applied, a script, that I had Python, a Python script that I had ChatGPT help develop for me, that essentially uses website domains that are, entered into a lead form, creation of an account, to then call, out to that service for ChatGPT to essentially read the domain, that it's been inputted, look at the website for things like keywords, things that we determine as, this would be a partner, or this would be a direct client, and then classify that with roughly 90 to 95% accuracy. So that last 5% of the job is really all we're saving for the human intervention to kind of come in and double check, oh, is this a likely partner, or maybe this is a likely website owner. So it's that fringe, where we can't make the full distinction, and then it saves, 90% of the time, on the sort of classification side, so they can move on to, things like, personalization of their emails, other more sort of strategic sales, outbound approaches that aren't just, is this, or is this that. So again, using AI to assist.
And that particular use case, was it something like, God, somebody's got to figure out how we can do this better, or was it just one day you're like, hey, why don't we just try this AI thing? Was it like was there somebody who said we need to operationalize this, or was it just one day you got fed up and were like, let's see if we can do something about this?
So it came to my desk because we realized, our SDRs are spending like where's the sort of 80/20 Pareto of like where our reps spend the most of their time, and we found that it's in this vetting process of simply,
Wow.
going to a website and determining, what type of, because we do a lot of inbound leads. So for everyone that we get, we want to touch it and give it the right care. But sometimes the process of determining if it's a real lead, if it's going to go to a 404 site, things like that. You know, Obviously for every website that they're going to, it just that bogs them down, and it makes us our speed to lead slower. It makes obviously the user experience suffer when we can't get back to them as quickly. So by simply using ChatGPT to evaluate this domain with publicly available information that's right there on their website, we can pretty effectively classify these accounts coming in, and then that's a whole aspect of the vetting that's already pre-done for them, which saves a ton of time for them. And then we can leverage that in things like our lead orchestration and assignment rules, so that at least we've sort of done a lot of the legwork for them before they have to obviously do the rest of the work.
So that was the majority of their time was spent on this one task that was kind of a useless task, or not useless, but it was busy work, and you were able to basically automate it, um, and save a whole bunch of time, which is I think kind of like the perfect example of the value of AI. I think often people get so abstract about these huge things that they lose track of the kind of simpler things that are, you could basically fix, instead of maybe outsourcing it to somebody to do that busy work, or forcing your reps to kind of do that. Um,
And the
so
other piece of it, right, is it effective, or like is obviously we had to prompt engineer it to get to a point where it was first start out at 65-70% sort of likelihood to, and so it's like, okay, well, we're saving 70%, could we ratchet that up all the way up to 90-95%, and that accuracy was something that was really viable and sort of sought after for our sales leaders, because the more effective the AI could become to sort of reduce that time, the more efficient our reps could obviously be with it. So it's that balance of like, if we were only able to effectively classify 50% of these using an AI script, like maybe the earlier models could have done, then obviously it's not as effective. But as we doctored the prompt and made it exactly what we wanted it to be, and tested it and had human intervention there assisting it, it was able to sort of essentially do what a human could do, with enough, obviously adjusted inputs.
yeah, so I wanted to get your input on this because I've been asking people a lot about this. I recently read an article. Are you familiar with the company Klarna?
Yeah,
Yeah. So they had their CEO, and there's kind of people are like unsure if he was said this for to create buzz, or if it's legit, that they've essentially deprecated the use of enterprise software like Workday and Salesforce, and are basically only using AI and uh, knowledge graph database, essentially. That over time, they basically were able to create this internal database that was able to make these connections. And essentially, people have, whether it's customer success or sales, have a chat interface, and they can kind of get this information when they need it. I don't, he didn't give that much detail. Um, and it got me wondering, do you foresee a world in which all of these interfaces that people interact with, right? Whether it's the CRM, or the CPQ, or the billing system, whatever, that there won't be those things anymore, and we'll only be interacting with a chat interface? Is that a world you think will ever come to be in the in the next 10 years?
I mean, it's certainly an interesting concept. I think the way that our brains sort of work in structures. I think that that there's always going to be a need to sort of like put things in nice, neat piles, and that's why relational databases are so effective, is being able to sort of like easily kind of columnize and measure things. So I think for things like knowledge bases and things like that, customer information. I've seen. I'm really curious to go to Salesforce's World Tour event, next month, because it's all about Agent Force and all about sort of AI-driven chatbots and where they can leverage existing customer data with with your customers context for better user experience in place of obviously a human chatbot. So to me, that's an interesting application for basically interfacing with sort of an amalgamous sort of set of information. Obviously, it's made easier when you can columnize it and organize it and make it sort of labeled and tagged and whatever. So I think you're always going to need it to be something that's at least somewhat orderly, so that you can do things like you know board reporting and all of the sort of things that relational data was sort of bred out of. But I do think it's a fascinating concept to be able to leverage the context of your existing data stack across multiple systems, so you can tell a story or derive a narrative that is obviously more more can obviously more of a 360 view than just a single kind of picture or a profile on a database.
For sure. And like that's the kind of thing that fascinates me. I don't know if like normal people get interested in that kind of thing, but like I get very excited about it. But living in the world we live in now, in which RevOps kind of empowers go-to-market teams and acts often as kind of the product developer of those solutions that they're working on. You know, how do you think about, like you said, kind of orderly giving the end users of those solutions, the visibility they need without, the signal from the noise, and how you kind of create a workflow for them or enable a workflow for them that's efficient?
I mean, I think it has to come back to sort of like something that like is tangible for them, because simply, I think that's the thing that for non-practitioners of Gen AI tools, the thing that is sort of, I think, intimidating for them is like, what is my use case? Like, could I even apply this to my job, right? And I think that that's the sort of like learning curve that early adopters got in on pretty early. Is, well, it is sort of as good as the prompt that you derive. And if you can dream up a use case that you could apply it to, like my wife's a pastry chef, and we've experimented with things like menu design and obviously dish creation. And I think that should be saved, as she'll appreciate, for more of a creative kind of process, and development of obviously flavors and things like that. Like a chatbot can't do that. But I do think that curiosity is really the key to being able to apply AI to your job, and make it really a utility for your professional, personal, whatever application you have. Because at the end of the day, um, you know as we as end users test the limits, that drives the need for improving models. And it's kind of the one situation where we're as impactful to the design and future of it, as sort of the developers are, because we're constantly driving the learning of the model.
Yeah, it really does feel like a blue ocean, in terms of what's possible. And I think that's part of the challenge, right? It's the cold start problem. You're looking at a blank screen and a blinking thing, and you're like, okay, now what, right? Whereas if you go to an interface, you have all the things there, and you can. So yeah, it's kind of it's a challenge, I think. But stepping away from the AI stuff for now, and talking just kind of the quote unquote traditional tech stack. I think we're in a time, we're coming out of a period where, especially during the peak of the pandemic, when money was kind of falling from the sky, go-to-market teams kind of had the pick of the litter about whatever tools they wanted, and things got pretty bloated. And I think we saw a period of consolidation and contraction where people were looking to consolidate their tech stacks. And I don't know if we've kind of normalized, but when looking at the tech stack kind of in your organization or any organization that you're kind of working with. Um, what is the, filter with which you look about deciding, build or buy? Do we need a new solution? Can we optimize our existing tech stack and actually deprecate some solutions? Like, how do you kind of think about all
So I think it really comes down to like, not losing sight of like what you're ultimately trying to accomplish at the end of the day, because, if you're simply just getting tools for tools' sake, you're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, you're never going to sort of like have success, I think, that way, because I've said in talks before, I don't think that software is really like a silver bullet kind of thing where you can just put it in and it's going to solve all your problems. Like, I don't think anyone believes that today, that the solution is the software. I think the solution is surrounded by all of the things that make it successful, like the planning and the preparation, and obviously the key kind of influencers in the project, and obviously the good project management is important, and all of those things when it comes to a successful sort of implementation and rollout. Adoption and reporting and transparency and accountability of obviously the end goal. But I think if you have to not lose sight of like, why did we get this software in the first place, and if we get this, what is the sort of like ripple effect of that, right? Is it going to create redundancies? Is it going to, obviously create a situation where we can't integrate with that other tool? So does it play nicely with the rest of our stack? So I think all of these are considerations that you have to, I think, RevOps is very well positioned to do. But sometimes, we don't get brought in on the evaluation until, later in the process, or, maybe at the very end when, it's kind of a final check of approval. Like, does this is going to touch Salesforce? Does this work, for your system? But it's like, well, Salesforce touches a lot more. So the spider web and the sort of like this wheel spoke of what is impacted is very sensitive and very finicky. So I think the earlier on RevOps is brought in on the decision making of the tool stack, the vision for what it's going to ultimately add, and obviously the sort of perspective that is added there, that what is this potentially going to block or remove as well, because I think those are like, a lot of times people don't think like of the subtraction by addition effect of adding new software. But adding one more pile of data is requires management and maintenance, and obviously upkeep. So if you're just adding a system that's going to collect cobwebs and no one's going to really manage to that process, you're obviously setting yourself up for failure. So all those things to say, like, you have to have kind of a clear set of outcomes and visions in mind from the very beginning, and that, I think, starts with like tool selection and sort of vendor procurement.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of another conversation that we were having kind of in the group there, talking about tool selection and implementation, and ensuring success of implementation, and how to kind of ensure that there isn't implementations that don't go right. And so maybe we could double click a little bit on what you were talking about, and from a RevOps perspective, assuming that you're in the room and you have, you're strategic RevOps and you're given the opportunity to have a say. How is, the vendor selection and implementation process done in a way that you can maybe not ensure, but as best as you can, make sure that, you've crossed your I's and dotted your T's so that you don't get stuck in a broken implementation process?
Yeah, I mean, if there was like a silver bullet for this, I think every RevOps team, every sort of project
Right.
manager team across the board would definitely be signing up for it. But I think it starts by having realistic expectations of oftentimes implementations have phased approaches of sort of, this is our minimum viable, this is our sort of phase one, phase two, this is sort of the pie in the sky vision for once we get this all rolled out. And I think that people lose sight of um, kind of these milestones, and kind of stopping to say and evaluate and say like, okay, did we succeed in, we obviously talk about it in sales a lot of like, getting to these sort of like win milestones. And I think that's important for project management and implementations as well, is that sort of inflection point of, okay, like whether it's in scoping or in sort of vendor selection. I think you're like staying lockstep with the select, like both the the end users, the sort of managing leaders that are obviously going to be responsible for standing up the tool, and obviously the admins that are going to be working through it day to day. Making sure that all of them are clear cut on what the expectations for the tool is. Something as simple as rolling out a new calendaring tool or a new dialer. Where does the data go? What is the is this going to cross wires with something that exists already? So I think dependencies and sort of requirements gathering are critical to the very foundation of the project, and then using that as your compass throughout, and making sure that people, as things maybe fall off the priority list, and as vendors maybe get eliminated, making sure that you're always centering back to, okay, does this solve like what we set out to solve? Because if it doesn't, then like just simply sticking in a piece of software that's a sort of round peg square hole, like doesn't really, it's not a good investment of our money, right? So I think we get in these positions where it's like, oh, we've committed time to this, we've sort of done the evaluation, like we have to make a decision. It's like, well, if none of the if the simply standing pat and making a decision of no, like because it's not the right time or we don't have the right resources, is an okay thing as well, because at the end of the day, the wrong decision could set you back further than a no decision. So I think that simply making the bold choice isn't always the right one. Sometimes you do have to, action is better than inaction, but I think you do have to be careful of setting off on an implementation that maybe there's changeover in leadership, or things like, are we going to have a consistent, like, are we going to be set up for success, right, throughout this next 3 months of this implementation? You might have leadership changes, you might have turnover within the implementation team, like all these things like could buck the success of it. And I think you have to have that foresight as the RevOps person, or the project leader, that what's the worst case scenario here? If we lost our project sponsor tomorrow, like what does that mean for the project, right? Because anyone that's gone through enough of these recognizes that like you can't obviously predict for everything, but I think that in your mind, if that is something that is a possibility, or could be a derailer, like how do you get through that if that is the case, right? Because it's not the end of the world, but it is something that needs to be solved for.
Right. So oftentimes when people are looking at bringing on a new tool, if that's the case that they go to, it, they had started with some sort of internal solution, Google Sheets, whatever. Tying this back to AI, do you think that with these tools and kind of the democratization of knowledge that they kind of offer, um, that perhaps there are companies now can get further on those internal tools before they have to make a decision? They maybe can kind of squeak out a little bit more juice of that crazy spreadsheet before deciding they need to use Salesforce.
I mean, I think so, right? Like, the original sort of tools like Excel and, obviously Google Sheets, and, those tools are really kind of bread and butter analytical type tools. So if you can squeeze more out of that lemon, like ultimately, uh, you know, you do have to do backflips in MacGyver sometimes as as an operational leader, operational professional, because there's a job to be done, or an outcome that is needing to be solved for. And however you kind of get there, maybe that end user doesn't care. They just want what they want, and they don't know how hard it is to get there. And so if you can use tools like AI, to make Excel easier to understand for you, or just have you know something like a Python script that does 3 steps instead of 5, automated, like to me, that is where AI can come into play and make you look like a superstar when all you had to do was ask the right question to the chatbot, test it and validate it, and then give a product that would have taken potentially prior months and months of development and a resource outside of your purview. So I think that's kind of how this sort of partner direct tool came to be. Was I bet ChatGPT, if I gave it the right prompt and kind of built up from what the original kind of can it do this little thing? Okay, could it do this little thing in an automated fashion? Could it do this automated thing in an automated fashion, and like productionalized within all, like without having to feed it like a chat script? Like, could I just call the API directly? So as you mature your solution, I think using AI to make it even more uh, sophisticated is a great application of AI.
Awesome. All right, Demar, thank you so much for your time today. As we close things up, we're kind of heading into the final quarter of the year. We have 2025 looking at us down the barrel here. From a RevOps perspective, how do you see, you know, 2025? And this, I know this is like very broad and asking you to kind of be a oracle, but what are some of the kind of big changes to look out for, I think, on the RevOps side in 2025 that will impact folks in this space?
You said you think it's sort of normalized and settled down, but I don't think we've reached the sort of full sort of like maturity of the sort of consolidate. I think there'll be another big consolidation that sort of will shock us sometime in 25. I think there'll be more, obviously, exciting applications for AI. I'm really excited to see how the sort of leveling of the playing field when it comes to these different AI models goes, because everyone is I think the rising tide lifting all the ships is obviously a good thing, but it also it's another year of experience using these tools. It's another year of pushing the envelope for the early adopters. So I'm excited for obviously um, just the community of RevOps as well. We have great groups out there that are going to be going into some of them their second year of having a conference. So I'm excited to sort of see where these really amazing communities take the sort of RevOps landscape. Just from a community standpoint as well, because I think there's a lot of really great leaders in this community, and they're starting to finally get the sort of recognition and sort of public sort of medium and space to sort of be that force. So excited to see where my RevOps practitioners and leaders take the community next.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we're putting so much focus on these, generative AI models that are decidedly unhuman. But then there's also this real interest in genuine human interaction that has a real value, maybe even more so now than before. And so that's an interesting thing. Like maybe the more we rely on interacting with AIs, the more we, need that human interaction. I think that's a whole other conversation for another day.
Yeah,
But
well, I mean, I'm sure I will definitely see you, at one of these, at the next event soon. So can't wait to catch up on that. But yeah, I'm excited to hear, more about, all of the exciting things that DealHub has coming down the pipe as well.
yeah. All right, Demar, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Really appreciate it.